Method of Madness by Paul Lewis. Read by Ross Kemp.
The bar was Saturday night noisy. Babbles of voices, jukebox gone insane, shrieking a metal fan's tasteless selection. Stale smells, sweat, cigarettes, beer, all ganged up to assault me as I pushed my way through the crowd to the bar. Some spotty kid couldn't have been much older than 19, turned away from the counter carrying 2 beers. He caught my shoulder with his jutting left elbow as he went past. "Sorry, pal," he muttered, not looking up. I grunted a friendly, "That's okay," in response and scanned the line of bar stools. She was there, waiting for me, just as we'd arranged. 30 or so, blonde, slim, not too much makeup, just enough to hide the faint wrinkling around her baby blues. She had a drink already. It looked like orange. I hoped that was a vodka and orange. I wanted her relaxed, at ease with me. She smiled as I walked towards her. "Hi," she said. "Hi. Sorry I'm late, couldn't get a cab." No, that's okay. I was early." And it went on. Dialogue so bad it would disgrace a B-movie. I sat with her at the bar for maybe an hour, not much longer, biding my time. Timing was always important. Then, when the noise got about as loud as it could conceivably get, the crowd as claustrophobic as possible, I suggested somewhere else. She jumped at the chance. Winter was grudgingly giving way to spring. Although the evenings had started to lengthen, there was no daylight left now. Orange street lamps tried to punch holes in the night without much success. I held her hand after a few tentative, almost accidental brushes as we walked. Nearly 10 o'clock, and dark. But a warmish breeze had sprung up from somewhere, and the night was unseasonably pleasant. And quiet. Perfectly quiet. This was how I liked it. We strolled and chatted, me laughing easily whenever she said something I knew which she meant to be witty. "So, what do you do? For a living, I mean," she said. "I'm a writer, well, a journalist," I added, in a tone suggesting I found my occupation a cause for embarrassment. "Really? I've never dated a reporter before." "Well, there's a first time for everything," I said. We walked through the main part of the town and out the other side, leaving the shops and bars and nightclubs behind, heading for the river. "Where are we going?" "Well, I thought you might fancy a walk along the riverbank." "I'm cold," she said. Her whining voice was beginning to grate on me, but somehow I managed to smile. "You won't feel cold in a moment," I said, and she laughed. The river was eerie by moonlight, black flecked with silver. It'd sound a constant burst of white noise in the darkness. The wide path alongside was separated from the water by bushes. We walked a little way along it, and then stopped and embraced. I pressed my lips against hers, felt her body push against mine. One hand reached out to the back of her neck, caressing. The other eased into my jacket pocket to grip the knife. I'd spent most of the afternoon sharpening the thing, and knew it would have my fingers off if I wasn't, oh, so careful taking it out. Both my arms around her waist now. I pulled her close and unwrapped the square of cloth behind her back. When the blade was revealed, and I twisted away from her, my arm rising then falling, a flash of light, a reflection of moonlight, her sudden cry seemed piercingly loud in the darkness. The next morning, I went out and bought a copy of every paper the newsagents had on its shelf. The locals made a real splash of the murder, of course, but it had also merited a front-page mention in the Express, although most of the story was continued on page 2. Even the Times thought it warranted a column on page 3. Tracy, a 31-year-old secretary, was found dead at the edge of the river by 2 dawn fishermen. She had been stabbed repeatedly. She was seen in the city centre bar the previous night with a man police now want to trace. He is described as... The description didn't matter. From the moment I'd arrived home last night, it was out of date. I looked a different man once the hair dye was washed away and the moustache was gently tugged off. Changing out of that ridiculously old-fashioned suit into my usual denims completed the transformation. The suit would have to go, of course, because of the blood. Dead giveaway, so to speak. It would join the other junk I would burn in a backyard bonfire later. I dropped the newspaper and leaned back in my chair, silently listing the lessons that were to be learnt. It had all gone smoothly enough. Maybe I'd pushed my luck a little with the busy bar, but I was virtually certain nobody was going to recognise me. I could picture the scene in my mind. The detective is mid-40s, beer-bellied, angry because this has happened in his town. There was a kid no more than 19 who remembers seeing Tracy in the bar that night. Who was she with, the detective asks, trying to be gentle with the spotted little nobody, remembering that after all he isn't the one who stuck the knife in. A man, responds the kid nervously, about 6 foot, brown hair, glasses, had a sort of old-fashioned suit on, you know, like something from the 70s, big lapels and stuff. You seen him anywhere before? The kid frowns, shaking his head. Don't think so. No, I'm sure I haven't. He shakes his head again, as if to give his words extra emphasis. And even if there is the smallest niggling doubt in the back of his mind, it'll go away before too long. No, I had no worries on that score. What I was less than happy with was the persona I'd adopted for that night. Mike Bradford, journalist, an occupation inspired by the media coverage of the previous murders. It had seemed a nicely ironic touch at the time, but now I had second thoughts. Nothing I could put my finger on. It was just something I felt truly uncomfortable with, in the same way that I'd not felt at ease with Robert Collins or Kevin Johnson or any of the other temporary lives I'd created while I went about my work. For the next one, I became Peter Lloyd. I not only had him sussed, I also liked him an awful lot. He could be the one, I thought. Lloyd was a quietly confident man, a teacher who wrote short stories in his spare time. The writing was a sort of secret, something he had only told a few close friends about, such as the girl I was with tonight. She was pretty in an old-fashioned, almost prudish sort of way. She wore no makeup, had her hair in a ponytail, bore scars to remind her of her teenage acne. Her clothes were more suited to a woman 10 years older. She was waiting for me outside the cinema. She had told me when we'd met at a party I'd gatecrashed that she didn't like bars. We walked out of the theatre into the rainy night. I turned my collar up, shivering, and searched the streets for a taxi. She enjoyed the film, Woody Allen's latest, although he'd only directed in it, not starred, and after a little gentle persuasion, had agreed to the suggestion of dinner at a good Chinese restaurant I knew. 2 hours later, it was looking very promising. I had talked until I thought my throat would go raw. She was hardly the world's greatest conversationalist, but as my pleasant chatter continued, she gradually contributed more to the dialogue. Then she had agreed to a glass of wine to accompany the pungent chicken dish she had chosen as her main course. That glass had led to a second. A third was not far behind, and after that, she opened up considerably. Not as much, however, as she would open up later. Nearly midnight, the restaurant was quiet. The post-pub crowd had left for home. The disco crowd was a good 2 hours away. She was laughing like a kid. Not that she'd drunk a lot of wine. She just wasn't used to that amount she'd put away. I was very happy about this. It would make my work a lot easier. I called over the waiter, the type of Chinese who gave all the customers the same sneering look, ordered 2 final glasses of wine, and then went to the public phone and booked a cab. Sitting in the car so close to the driver who might later remember me was not the brightest of ideas, of course, but I was in a mood for taking risks. Besides, what would the driver remember? A blonde guy with dark eyes, trendy suit, Italian or something, snakeskin loafers, spoke with a hint of a stutter and some kind of an accent. Tip well. This will be fine, I told the driver. The girl blinked. I don't live here. Don't worry, I smiled. You'll like this. We got out, me reaching into the driver's open window and handing him a note. Keep it. The driver gave his first grin of the night. Thanks, friend. I watched the car pull away, then took the girl's arm and began leading her towards the park I'd spotted on my afternoon reconnaissance. I whistled cheerfully snatches of old songs, improvised melodies, anything that came to mind. The girl was obviously nervous. Where are we going? Just wait and see, I told her. There's this place not many people know about. Believe me, you'll love it. Promise? I promised. So we entered the park and I took out the knife and began to show her the place. But I had to break my promise. She didn't love it at all. From the way Detective Carl Cameron glared at me, I knew exactly what was going through his mind. He had tracked down the killer and there was no way I was going to slip off the hook. I relished the challenge. Cameron was in his mid-40s, a beer-bellied man who'd looked as if he'd spent his life in a perpetual bad mood. He sucked deeply on a battered Marlboro and stood behind me. "Now," he said, measuring his words carefully, "are you going to talk, or am I going to have to stop being so nice?" "Go screw yourself," I replied cheerfully. "Oh, and while you're at it, get hold of a new cop cliché book. Yours is out of date." Cameron nodded. I suppose he had not expected an easy time of it. From the moment they had pulled me in, I'd refused to give my name. My prints did not show up on the file, and, just to put them off guard, I had refused a lawyer. Perhaps he'd expected me to confess or at least cooperate, but all I had done was act the smartass. "We know you did it," Cameron tried. "Just a matter of time to get the evidence together, plenty of witnesses to put you at the scene of at least 3 of the killings. I'd say you were in deep, deep trouble." I began scraping dirt from beneath my fingernails, using the left thumb to clean the right hand and vice versa. It was a calm, studied action designed to get on Cameron's nerves. It worked. "Cut that out," he snapped. "You'd make life a lot easier for both of us if you started talking." I leaned back in my chair and sighed. "Okay," I said. "Okay." Cameron pushed the tape recorder's play button. "My parents never loved me." Cameron shut the recorder off. "Think you're funny, right?" "Right," I said, nodding solemnly. I glanced casually around the interview room. Wasn't much to look at, really, just walls, a door locked from the outside, and a mirror. I blew a kiss at the mirror for the benefit of those behind it. "This place," I said thoughtfully, "could do with a lick of paint." Cameron swore. He walked to the door and pounded on it. "Open her up!" He turned and faced me. "Better start thinking this one over. I'll be back with a friend, and he ain't half as pleasant as me." "Great," I grinned. "I'll get the coffee on." Later, the questions started again, only this time for real. I don't like being interviewed. As far as I'm concerned, I do what I do, and my work speaks for itself. But compromises sometimes have to be made. The studio PR girl had made that clear. So I sat in my trailer sipping mineral water, waiting for the next take, a complex multi-camera scene. A young kid in jeans and a dire straight t-shirt was hovering around me with a Nikon, firing off shots from this angle and that. I tried to ignore him, concentrating instead on the more dignified movie universe writer who took notes the old-fashioned way with pen and pad. "Mr. Shaw." "Tony, please." Smile. "Tony, your character in the film Peter Lloyd is a pure psychopath. It's your first major role, so how did you prepare for it?" "I didn't," I said. "Just got my own idea of how a psycho would behave and went with it. Sure, Peter Lloyd started off as a character in the script, but I knew I could bring him to life." The writer scribbled frantically, delighted with the responses. He had watched the police interrogation scene we'd just filmed, and I guess he'd found it powerful stuff. I was going to be big news, and here he was, the only reporter allowed a face-to-face with the star. "You obviously don't believe in the method school of acting, then?" I laughed. "Oh, I've got my methods all right, but I don't think Streep or Hoffman would be too impressed." The writer's tone became more serious. "There's some controversy surrounding the film, even while it shoots." "Yeah, those murders," I responded quietly. "Terrible, terrible. But suggesting they've got anything to do with this film is ridiculous, honestly. There are guys out there who don't need any inspiration from the movies to do atrocious things. That's just the way they are." Now the writer relaxed again. Tricky question out of the way. "So what's next for you after this?" he asked, his allotted time almost up. "Fancy being a hero?" "Maybe," I said, "but maybe not. I like playing the bad guy. It's a lot of fun. Besides," I added, knowing it would make a good quote, "there's a little bit of a psychopath in all of us, right?"